The importance of continuous learning in trading is often misunderstood as the need to constantly acquire new strategies, indicators, or market secrets. In reality, continuous learning in trading has far less to do with accumulation and far more to do with adaptation. Markets evolve, volatility, regimes shift, participants change, and even your own psychology is not static. Trading literature written by those who endure long careers makes one thing clear: the trader who stops learning does not fail. Immediately, they slowly drift out of alignment with reality, and that drift is what eventually becomes fatal. At the beginning of a trading journey, learning feels obvious. You study charts, terminology, risk management, and basic structure. Progress feels tangible because ignorance is visible. But as experience grows, learning becomes more subtle and therefore easier to neglect. You begin to feel competent. You recognize patterns. You know your setups. This is the most dangerous phase. Not because confidence is wrong, but because it creates the illusion that learning is complete. In trading, what you know today may still be true tomorrow, but how it behaves tomorrow may not be. Continuous learning exists to bridge that gap. One of the first shifts continuous learning requires is moving from external learning to internal learning. Early on, traders learn from books, courses, and mentors. Later, the market itself becomes the primary teacher. Every trade, every drawdown, every deviation from plan contains information. Continuous learners treat these events as data, not judgment. They ask what changed, what repeated, and what this reveals about both the market and their own behavior. Trading literature often emphasizes that the market never stops giving feedback, but only disciplined learners know how to listen without becoming reactive. Another critical aspect of continuous learning is recognizing that markets change faster than strategies. A setup that performs well in trending conditions may struggle in choppy environments. Volatility expansion alters stop placement and position sizing. Liquidity changes affect execution. Continuous learners do not abandon strategies at the first sign of discomfort, but they do study how performance varies across conditions. This curiosity prevents rigidity. It allows adaptation without constant reinvention, which is one of the hallmarks of professional maturity. Continuous learning also protects traders from ego stagnation. Success, even modest success, can quietly harden beliefs. The trader begins to interpret outcomes as validation of identity rather than evidence of alignment. This is when learning stops and defense begins. Trading literature repeatedly shows that long-term survivors cultivate intellectual humility. They assume they can be wrong even when they are profitable. They review winning trades as critically as losing ones. This openness keeps learning alive even during periods of success when complacency would otherwise creep in unnoticed. Journaling and review play a central role in this process. Without review, experience does not automatically become wisdom. It merely becomes repetition. Continuous learners turn repetition into refinement by examining patterns in execution, emotion, and outcome over time. They do not ask how to trade more. They ask how to trade better under the same rules. This incremental improvement compounds quietly. It does not create dramatic breakthroughs, but it prevents regression, which in trading is equally important. Another often overlooked element of continuous learning is unlearning. Markets punish outdated assumptions relentlessly. What worked before may stop working, not because it was wrong, but because conditions shifted. Continuous learners remain willing to let go of ideas, habits, or rules that no longer serve them. This is emotionally difficult. Letting go feels like admitting error. Yet trading literature consistently shows that adaptability is a stronger predictor of longevity than brilliance. Learning in trading is as much about subtraction as it is about addition. Continuous learning also extends beyond markets into the trader's life. Sleep health stress and external pressures influence decision-making far more than most traders admit. As experience grows, learning expands to include self-regulation, energy management, and emotional awareness. The trader learns not just when markets are favorable, but when they themselves are not. This self-knowledge is rarely taught directly, yet it becomes one of the most valuable forms of learning in a profession where the self is the primary instrument. Perhaps the most important realization continuous learning brings is that mastery in trading is not a destination. There is no final level where uncertainty disappears and confidence becomes permanent. Markets will always find new ways to test assumptions. Continuous learners accept this not as a threat, but as the nature of the craft. They replace the desire for certainty with the commitment to ongoing adjustment. Ultimately, the importance of continuous learning in trading lies in its ability to keep the trader aligned with reality as it changes. It prevents rigidity, tempers ego, sharpens discipline, and transforms experience into usable insight. And it is precisely at this point, when learning is no longer driven by the hunger for answers, but by the responsibility to remain adaptable, that trading evolves from a phase of discovery into a long-term practice of refinement. One that continues quietly forward as long as the trader remains willing to listen, question, and adjust, rather than assume that what worked once will always work again. And this is where the deeper work of continuous learning has not yet fully come to rest, because once learning becomes a responsibility rather than a curiosity, it changes how a trader relates to every outcome. Wins no longer signal arrival. Losses no longer signal failure. Both become prompts to observe, adjust, and refine. This is where continuous learning stops being something you do occasionally and becomes something embedded in how you operate daily. The trader no longer waits for problems to force learning. Learning is already present, quietly running in the background of every decision. At this level, continuous learning expresses itself through questions rather than answers. Instead of asking, "What strategy should I use?" now the trader asks, "Under what conditions does my current strategy perform best, and where does it struggle?" This shift matters. It moves. Learning away from novelty seeking and toward contextual understanding. Trading literature often highlights that edge is conditional. Continuous learners do not abandon edges when they weaken. They study the conditions under which that weakening occurs and adjust participation accordingly. This prevents both blind loyalty and constant reinvention. Another subtle evolution is how feedback is interpreted. Early in a trading journey, feedback feels personal. A loss feels like criticism. Later, feedback becomes informational. Continuous learners build emotional distance between identity and outcome. This distance allows them to examine mistakes without defensiveness and successes without complacency. Over time, this emotional neutrality accelerates learning because nothing needs to be protected. Ego no longer filters information before it is processed. Continuous learning also shows up in how traders relate to routine. The daily review, the journal, the post-session reflection are no longer treated as chores. They become maintenance. Just as an athlete trains fundamentals, even after reaching a high level, a trader revisits basics continually. Risk management, patience, execution, quality, emotional regulation are never considered done. Trading literature consistently emphasizes that regression happens quietly when maintenance stops. Continuous learning is what keeps the floor from dropping out beneath accumulated skill. There is also an important balance to be struck between stability and curiosity. Continuous learning does not mean constant change. In fact, Excessive change often signals insecurity rather than growth. Mature learners change slowly and deliberately. They collect evidence over time. They test ideas in small size. They separate curiosity from compulsion. This restraint protects the core while allowing evolution at the edges. It is how traders remain adaptable without becoming reactive. As years pass, continuous learning increasingly turns inward. The trader learns how different emotional states affect execution. They recognize personal cycles of energy confidence and fatigue. They adjust schedules, position size, and exposure based on self-awareness as much as market conditions. This is not self-indulgence. It is optimization of the primary instrument, which is the trader themselves. Many long-term professionals attribute their longevity not to superior strategies, but to superior self-knowledge, developed through years of attentive learning. Another hallmark of continuous learning is respect for silence. Not every period yields insight. Some weeks feel flat. Some months feel repetitive. Continuous learners resist the urge to force meaning during these times. They understand that integration often happens below the surface. Trading literature often describes learning as punctuated by long plateaus, followed by sudden clarity. Those who endure the plateaus without abandoning process are the ones who experience genuine breakthroughs later. Ultimately, continuous learning in trading is about staying aligned with reality, rather than defending a self-image. Markets change. You change. What matters is whether your understanding keeps pace. When learning is ongoing, mistakes shrink faster. Discipline recovers sooner, and confidence becomes quieter, but stronger. And so the role of continuous learning is not to make trading easier, but to make it sustainable. It ensures that skill does not fossilize, that success does not harden into arrogance, and that failure does not turn into avoidance. Trading becomes a long conversation between experience and adjustment. One that never truly ends, because the moment a trader believes there is nothing left to learn is usually the moment the market begins preparing its next lesson.